Welcome to the Calder Farmstead.
Now the Ice Hawks back out to center in transition. Carlson with Quenneville 2-on-1. Right with Carlson, Quenneville scores!
Here's a chance for Barrett. Fight, he scores! Off the face-off! Up it's Eminger. Pulled back to Werenski. Has it, shoots one, bounces off a man. 5 seconds left. Werenski, another jam on the shot, turning and firing. They go! Scores! They score! Now they catch each other and they both go right over the top. Matching rights to one another. McDermott gets the helmet off of Kessie.
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out right side with Bear. Looks like cutting to the net. Bear will score!
And here are your hosts, Cece and Sean.
Hello and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 44 for Friday, August 6th, 2021. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring discussion of digital soil condition sensors, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast, and my name is Cece Hockley.
And I promise, I am actually still Sean O'Brien.
He got rid of the lettuce, he got rid of the face fuzz, but that is still your one and only SOB, Sean O'Brien, right there. So, yeah, and again, thanks for coming back. Thanks for enjoying the show. And, thanks for enjoying the show. Thanks for tuning into the show. We haven't gotten to the end yet, so it will be enjoyable, I imagine.
And if you're new to hearing Cece and I talk about hockey, we're going to talk about some AHL news that's gone on so far this offseason. We are fully in off-season mode as we don't have live games to talk about anymore. So we'll check in throughout the off-season to talk about news or maybe do a deep dive into some outside-the-box AHL topics when we get bored, like what would you do if you were the AHL commissioner for a day? Or which coach would win an all-AHL coaches Royal Rumble? Until then, relax and shoot the AHL offseason breeze with us. This is going to be a very jam-packed episode as things are happening and have very much happened in the last 36-ish hours.
Oh,
so
gosh.
Let's get right to it.
Yeah, Sean, not even 36 hours. We're talking like 12 hours. I mean, we had 2 coaching positions filled by noon, your time, Eastern Daylight Time. And then we also had our first topic of news, our first point to get to on the show today. And that's the AHL's new playoff schedule where, for lack of a better term, a shit ton of teams make the postseason. And Sean, yeah, I'm gonna share my screen real quick for those watching, because I wanted to show, I want to show that. Oh gosh, and of course we're gonna have technical difficulties here. Yeah, never mind. So I was gonna show the fans the playoff format, because you have just 2 teams from each division that don't make the postseason out of each of the 4 divisions. So, for example, the Pacific Division having 9 teams this offseason, 9 teams this season, adding another one in the offseason with the Abbotsford Canucks. They have 7 teams making the postseason. And to kind of get it back on track, Sean, I think the phrase that you used before the show is that this is a bit of a gong show in regards to a postseason format.
Yeah, this is a gong show, and I don't understand who decided to do it this way, why they came up with it. I mean, to me, now you're adding all these extra teams. So the regular season is now almost completely meaningless. Like, the hockey regular seasons are already, in my opinion, too long and too, grinding and not very fruitful. Like, they're there to generate ticket revenue and stats for players and standings points, more or less. But this is a complete mess. So the 3rd best team in the North and Central Division get buys in the first round of their playoffs, and they're like kind of play-in format. But only one Pacific team does. That's not fair. That's not even approaching fair. One bad weekend for the 2nd best team in the largest division in the AHL, and the 7th seed is moving on and the 2nd seed is out. That means that a team that is very likely one of the 10 worst in the AHL could make the 2nd round by winning 2 out of 3 games, which absolutely can happen. Hockey has a lot of randomness in it. One pair of back-to-back games from your goalie who's on fire, and you've put a likely bottom 10 team into the second round of the playoffs. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. But whatever. Also, the AHL basically said, we're changing from a 76-game regular season to a 72-game regular season, but with 3 extra games, you can charge playoff prices for. So if we were wondering, how the league got teams to agree to less, games and therefore less ticket revenue, I think we just figured it out. They basically just turned, 3 regular season games into playoff games where they're going to charge you playoff ticket prices, which is absurd. There was a better way to do this too. If you wanted to make more teams, quote unquote, make the postseason, you could do so in an actually somewhat fair fashion. This wasn't that hard of a lift here. You take the top 6 teams from each division. The first and second have buys. 3 through 6 play a best of 3 series to play for the 3 and 4 seeds. You reseed, and then you continue the playoffs as normal. You have your normal 16 teams. 24 make it, so 1 more than you were already planning on. And buys are assigned evenly. That makes way more sense than what they're doing. I still think that's a dumb format, but it's at least a more fair dumb format. This is solving a problem I don't think actually existed.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conjecture out there saying that, well, they expanded the playoff formats because there was none last year. They expanded it so that, more players that missed out on a postseason format can actually participate. Well, as proven by the AHL Pacific Division players vote that got leaked, before the 2021 postseason, the majority of the players did not want to play in a postseason. So it's like you have 23 out of your 31 existing teams, because Palm Springs will make it 32 in 2022-23. So you have 23 teams out of your 31 making the postseason. And we hear in professional sports about expanding the playoffs in Major League Baseball. They added another wild card spot. Expanding the season and expanding the playoffs in the NFL. They added another wild card spot this season. And it's like, yes, once you get to a certain number, you should thoroughly consider expanding the postseason. But when you just go back to the status quo and still have 31 teams, expanding it to where, like you said, Sean, only 1 Pacific Division team gets that first round bye. I finally got the technical issues worked out and showed you the bracket earlier while Sean was talking. 1 Pacific Division team gets a first round bye. 3 Central Division teams get a first round bye, and 4 and 5 battle it out to face the 1 seed in the next round. 3 North Division teams get into that bye, and then 2 Atlantic Division teams get into that bye spot, while 3 through 6 play in the first round. It's just a very wonky format. It feels very forced, in my opinion. And I'm with you, Sean. Imagine that. We're on the same page for once. I don't like it. One bit.
Especially too, you are almost guaranteed to send teams with losing records into the next round. That's dumb. That really makes the regular season feel pointless. Yes, are people still going to go to regular season games? Of course. People don't stop going to hockey games because the AHL makes dumb rules. They stop going because there's no more hockey or they're unhappy with the team or something like that. But also too, you can't retcon playoffs from last year. The players that missed out or whatever, those are days of past. You can't, try and change the past by fixing the future. That's not how time works.
No, unless you own a DeLorean, which I don't think Scott Howson has that in his possession. But anyway, well, moving on, we could belabor that subject, ad nauseum, but we're not going to. We're going to move on to the tons of coaching changes that have occurred, or should I say the coaching positions that have been filled this offseason. And like I said, today, Thursday, August 5th, we had 2 positions filled, one of them with the Hershey Bears. And Sean was a bit surprised. He thought it was going to be Louis Robitaille. And yes, he's coming into his 5th season coaching the Victoriaville Tigers over there in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. It was not Louis Robitaille. It was Scott Allen. And if you missed it, Sean has a phenomenal meme that he spent a lot of good time on. Scott Allen versus the world. It'll take on Scott Pilgrim versus the world. So if you haven't checked that out on our social media channels, go do it right now because it is hilarious. And it even worked out with the number of teams and everything in the North Division there. So go check that out. Little sidebar there, but Sean, Scott Allen, new head coach of the Hershey Bears, coming off of the league leading season where they captured the regular season championship. I'm using air quotes if you're listening just on the audio format, but I think one word to describe this Allen signing, what would you say it is, Sean?
Yikes. Like you said, I really thought this was going to be Louis Robitaille. I thought Louis Robitaille was the slam dunk hire here. He has good coaching experience working with younger prospects. He's been successful in the queue. He's a Bears, alumnus, but he has credentials. Like, he fits a lot of the boxes that you would be wanting to check with this hire. Scott Allen has a lot of experience, but nearly all of it is as an assistant coach and on losing teams. So he's been an assistant coach or a head coach in the AHL or NHL for the last 21 consecutive years. Out of those 21 years, his teams that he was a coach on as an assistant or a head coach had winning records in 8 of those 21 seasons. That's not great. Those years are the last 2 years with the Bears, the 15-16 Portland Pirates, the 14-15 San Antonio Rampage, 13-14 Chicago Wolves, the 06-07 Knights, the 04-05 Lowell Lock Monsters, and the 02-03 Rampage. And there are a lot of gaps in those years between winning records. Now, of those 8 that had winning records, there were only playoffs held in 6, basically all of them except the last 2 Bears seasons. Of those 6 seasons that his teams made the playoffs, they are 2-6 in playoff series. Also, not ideal. So that gives me concern, especially too, is like there aren't a lot of, development of 3rd round, 4th round picks in those teams either. And yes, as an assistant coach, that's not all on you, but his track record is more long than I think it is impressive. And that concerns me. Now, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't have hired Scott Allen. That's a bad hire, but it does give me a lot of cause for concern. And I think that's justified. I will say too, despite Spencer Carberry and I not seeing eye to eye on tactics and deployment and a lot of other things, his Bears teams were good. They won games. And if nothing else, I'm concerned that Scott Allen is not going to be able to win at the same clip as Spencer Carberry. And you could see Hershey taking a step back here from, clear-cut Calder Cup contender to playoff team with a chance. Now, that's not terrible, and maybe Scott Allen will surprise me here. Their moves this offseason have been hit and miss, in my opinion, but I would be cautiously optimistic here at best if I were a Bears fan.
Now, he also brought in, Scott Allen. I don't know why I'm thinking Steve Allen. Got Apple products on the mind, apparently. But Scott Allen brought in Steve Bergen. There we go. That's where I got the mix up there between Steve and Scott. Steve Bergen from the South Carolina Stingrays. And Bergen actually stepped in for South Carolina after they let go of Spiros Anastas. He went up to Brampton, which was strange because he led South Carolina to the playoffs and everything. But from what I've heard, it just wasn't a fit. Like the coaching and the organizational, it wasn't an organizational fit. So you bring in Steve Bergen as the head coach in 1920. He wins the ECHL Coach of the Year award in 1920. And, the Bears, Bergen left the Bears 2 seasons ago, the ECHL affiliate 2 seasons ago in the Stingrays after a very successful first campaign as the head coach. And that was a move that was kind of surprising to basically everyone. They're like, well, where's he going? And he left to be an assistant at Sacred Heart. He went to go take a college job, essentially. And the whispers were that he wanted to be closer to his family. And, he is from the New England area. So Hershey is about 4.5 hours from Sacred Heart by car, as compared to over 12 hours from South Carolina. So a bit more, a bit more reasonable, more of a doable trip than if you're coming up from South Carolina. But his one season at Sacred Heart didn't really go as well, as the Pioneers went 6-10-2. But like I mentioned earlier, coach of the year and everything, easy to do when you've got Logan Thompson in net. Just throwing that out there. Well, maybe not so easy, but definitely didn't hurt. But, successful track record in the ECHL. I think promoting ECHL coaches instead of blindly hiring former players without experience is obviously a good point. Sean and I have gone back and forth between the hiring processes of coaches in organizations. And
we'll get to that later on.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. But this is an instance where it went well and where it was a deserved promotion for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we'll get to the second coaching hire of the day here on Thursday as we're recording, but we're going to go north of the border and we're going to talk about Jean-Francois Houle. And he is the new head coach of the Laval Rocket up there it's the North Division now, right? It's not just the Canadian division up there this season. Time to switch gears and retrain the brain for sure. So Houle, a lot of coaching experience, including as an assistant at the AHL level. Plus, he's from the province and speaks French. That's always good. That's always kind of a unspoken prerequisite in the Montreal Canadiens organization. Checks all the boxes for sure. His AHL experience as a coach hasn't had the most positive outcomes, although since pairing with Jay Woodcroft, the results definitely improved. His QMJHL record is spectacular. I wouldn't call this a slam dunk hire necessarily, that in mind, but I am cautiously optimistic here. So, Sean, that was my take. What say you on Houle?
I'm in a similar boat there. I have been whelmed by his resume at the professional level. He was very successful in juniors, but at Bakersfield bounced kind of all over the place. When Woodcroft came in, they did better, but it's hard to say when you're an assistant coach on those teams how much of that is your fault versus not. So I'm not saying he's undeserving of a shot. There are other coaches that were recent hires who had a shinier resume than his, but when you need them to speak French, that kind of limits your pool. But he definitely has his work cut out for him, as Laval under Joël Bouchard did very well. Bouchard got a few of Montreal's prospects, quote unquote, back on track, it seemed, which is saying something. Is their AHL level prospect pool isn't that deep. That's not to say Montreal doesn't have good young guys, but that most of them are in the NHL already. Cole Caulfield, Alexander Romanov, Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Getting guys like Brian Paling, Jesse Ilonen, Josh Brook, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, or Matthias Norlander NHL ready, that's really going to be his task and his kind of measuring stick, as well as, the obvious, winning some games. Nobody wants, to have your prospects go, 14 wins on a 72-game season. So you do need to win games, but his focus is going to be more on getting those guys who are later round picks that are available to him as NHL ready as he can. And that's not going to be easy. Byron Bader's model has Norlander as the most likely to be an everyday NHLer out of that group I just named at 40%. Brook is second at 39%. Harvey-Pinard is third at 20% chance to be an everyday NHLer. So there's a lot of progress to be made there. And I think Bouchard definitely helped push those guys from trending down to trending back up, but he's going to need to put in some work with them.
Well, it's interesting. Bouchard went and took the head coaching job there in San Diego. And then Laval's like, all right, well, we're going to pluck an assistant out of the Pacific Division. And not a one-for-one trade by any means, for sure. But yeah, Houle has been with the Bakersfield Condors all 6 seasons that they've been in the AHL. And fun fact, he was the head coach. His only pro head coaching year was in 14-15 with the Bakersfield Condors, but it was their last season in the ECHL. So, yeah.
And if memory serves, that didn't go so great.
It did not. They did not make the playoffs. Final record was 26-38-8. So a .417 points percentage. Not good, but you spend 6 seasons as an assistant in the AHL. You figure out how it works there at the AAA level, and I don't think this is a bad hire. And like you said, go ahead.
I'm very whelmed, not
Whelmed.
over, whelmed.
Right. I noticed your word choice there. I'm like, okay, he's not underwhelmed. He's not overwhelmed. He's just whelmed. So there you go. A decent hiring for the Laval Rocket and the Canadiens organization. Now we'll get to the second hiring of the day. And Mark Dennehy, we kind of earlier in the, well, I guess later in the season, earlier in the offseason, we kind of thought, well, a lot of coaches' jobs will be safe because this season was just so, topsy-turvy with COVID and the pandemic and everything. But Utica Comets, former Binghamton Devils head coach, now the affiliation goes to Utica, but Mark Dennehy promoted, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes again for those listening, promoted to chief scout of amateur scouting. And Kevin Dineen, we mentioned San Diego. Kevin Dineen was the former coach. His contract was not renewed. He will be the new head coach of the Utica Comets, the newest affiliate, AHL affiliate of the New Jersey Devils. So Kevin Dineen, bringing him in, he was a finalist for best coach here on the Calder Farmstead. So not a bad hire, not bad at all.
Yeah, it's not too shabby at all. I don't think it's a big secret that I thought Mark Dennehy was a bad coach. I thought he made a lot of blatant tactical errors. His players looked lost executing basic plays in transition all the time. He put a lot of young guys in roles they were very clearly not ready for and minutes that they were not able to handle. But basically trading Kevin Dineen for him is a huge upgrade in my mind. When he had Zegras and Drysdale on the roster, the goals looked like world beaters under Dineen. When they were stripped down because, like every year, the Ducks had serious injury problems, he kept a bare bones Gulls team afloat that was playing, defense at forward at defense. And they were able to go from this high-flying, fast-paced offense down to a grinded-out, dump and chase, forecheck and be tough team to accommodate what their roster was capable of and to shape around the talent they had. To be able to make those big changes, get players on the board, and execute those kind of tactical shifts mid-season, that's damn good coaching. And that's what Kevin Dineen did. Dineen also has the benefit of having experience coaching in the AHL under a Lindy Ruff coached NHL team, as he was the AHL coach in Portland when Lindy Ruff was the NHL coach in Buffalo, and that was their affiliation. Now, during that time, Portland went to Game 7 of the conference finals in 2 of the 3 seasons they overlapped. So that's at least a good sign as well. But I have a lot more faith in Dineen's ability to get the most out of this group. I don't know how Utica fans felt with their affiliation change and the roster they were about to inherit, but I would feel a lot better now. That is a very young team that is still going to make mistakes and in some cases is going to, have some growing pains. But I would much rather have Kevin Dineen behind the bench than Mark Dennehy. So whatever promotion Mark Dennehy managed to squeeze his way into, this is very good for Utica. Yeah,
and I mean, Utica needed, kind of, I think, a shot in the arm, especially with, Binghamton packing up shop and moving to Utica, Vancouver moving their Utica Comets over to Abbotsford, and Trent Cole following them over to Abbotsford. That leaves only one coaching vacancy left in the AHL currently, and that is with the Providence Bruins. So
I have this weird feeling we're going to get scooped. Like tomorrow at noon, they're going to announce that or whatever. And we're not going to have anything about it. So we're going to have to do an emergency episode. I have that feeling too.
Oh God.
All right.
I mean,
anyways,
yeah,
we do have one more coaching hire though. Cece, let's go back to Canada. What's going on with Manitoba?
Manitoba, yes, that's one other vacancy off the board. Mark Morrison, not a name that that either you nor I expected up there with the Moose, and it takes the kind of the inverse typical path and goes from an NHL assistant to an AHL head coach, which normally, like I pointed out a few episodes ago, like Rocky Thompson with the Chicago Wolves, he moved from AHL head coach to NHL assistant coach with the San Jose Sharks. So, but back to Mark Morrison, not a slam dunk for me, as a lot of his coaching teams have been with teams, or a lot of his coaching rather, have been with teams that were not very good. And how much of that?
I will say, how much of that is his fault as assistant coach is impossible to really say. But I understand why that gives you pause, and that kind of gives me some pause too. I'm a little more optimistic, but at the same point, like when I do look at the resume and the teams he did coach, like is he sending guys from those teams that were 3rd and 4th round picks? Like, is he turning that into found money for the organizations he was a coach for? And well, kind of, sort of. Was, his team, fostering a winning culture and winning games? Maybe less so. But especially as the Moose roster has lost Nathan Todd and doesn't look particularly deep in a division that has very strong teams in it, I'm on board with you here that this is not a slam dunk hire. I don't think it's a bad hire. It's very much kind of in the middle for me. Like, I'm okay with it, but I am concerned. I could see this going south pretty easily, even if Mark Morrison is a much better coach than I think he is, as that roster is not loaded for bear. I mean, they do still have Cole Perfetti, and that's always a thing, but you never know when the Jets are going to pull him out, as well as like there's good AHL talent behind him, but like that's going to be a tough ask to get him to be, competing hard in a very difficult division. But we underestimated the Moose last year and we're pretty wrong about it. So maybe let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Full Press AHL has a new writer, by the way, and his name is Jacob Stoller. We had him on the program to talk Moose a few episodes, and he is now #Full Press official. He actually broke the Nathan Todd signing to Springfield about a day before it was officially announced. So kudos to him. Insider! Kudos for him for getting the scoop. And him and I kind of talked about it back and forth. He's like, when should I drop it? I'm like, just go ahead and drop it now. This is fine. And I'm glad we did it. We agreed upon it then because, Springfield announced it. But yes, the Moose losing their leading scorer and Nathan Todd going to Springfield. So Mark Morrison, he's got that history, assistant with the St. John's Ice Caps when they were affiliated with the Winnipeg Jets and with the Moose for 2 seasons before going over to the Anaheim Ducks as an assistant. The last time he was a head coach, guess what? Another ECHL head coach, this time with the Victoria, British Columbia Salmon Kings. Do you remember them from the ECHL?
What year was that?
Early 2010s, late 2000s.
Yeah.
Very, very frequent opponent of the Idaho Steelheads. So I was very familiar with the Victoria Salmon Kings before they went off and decided that they wanted to be a WHL market for the Victoria Royals instead. But yes, he was the Salmon Kings head coach from 2006 to their last season. I believe it was their last season in 2011. So me and my ECHL background coming into play again. I love it. So anyway, that's it for coaching.
Well, that's it for head coaching.
Oh,
we do have some
correct.
Assistants and future head coaches to talk about.
Correct. That is correct. So, and like we spoke about earlier, a tale of good and bad processes hiring assistant coaches. I think I'm going to file this one into questionable because you just got name recognition here. Michael Pekka. If you're a 90s hockey fan, you remember those black and red Buffalo Sabres jerseys, Dominic Hasek, a la Dominic Hasek, and of course, Michael Pekka from that era. He joins the Rochester American staff as an assistant coach. And, he's got some coaching. He's got some coaching experience. And by some, I mean some, very, very little. Last year, minute. Last year, he was a player development coach for the Washington Capitals taxi squad. And then before that, his only other coaching experience, 2 years as the bench boss of the Buffalo Junior Sabres from 2012 to 2014. 7 to 9 years ago, he was named OJHL, that's Ontario Junior Hockey League Coach of the Year in 2012-13. But coaching in the OJ is nowhere near prep to coach in Major Junior, let alone the AHL or the ECHL for that matter. It seems like being a fan favorite from the Sabres heyday in the late 90s, like I mentioned earlier. That was his most qualifying resume line. And it's kind of a good old boys hire. And, as an assistant coach, I mean, there's not really a whole lot that you can, not a whole lot that's at risk in my opinion. But Sean, What are your thoughts?
I mean, also too, for the people who are listening who are like the OJ, that's like right there with, the OHL and stuff. No, so the tiers would be, you have major, junior in Canada and the somewhat equivalent USHL in America.
Right.
The step below that would be junior A in Canada and the NAHL, which I think is tier 2 junior in the United States. The tiers below that are where you find the OJ, in 2 tiers below major junior. And he had 2 years of experience there and won coach of the year, coaching 2 tiers below major junior, and just basically walks right into an AHL assistant job, second best league in the world. No.
Well, I mean, I guess when the Pegulas, how do you pronounce it?
Pegula.
Pegula. When the Pegulas,
Pegula.
Pegula. When they got the coaching staff like they did a couple off seasons ago, it's like, all right, maybe we need to do a PR move and hire a guy that's reminds them of the good old days. So
see, like the thing too that makes it silly is like, if you're going to do a PR move like that, do what Vancouver did, which is a sentence I don't say very often. Like, bring in the Sedins as special advisors to the GM. Like, that will get you PR points. The assistant coach of your AHL team is not getting you PR points, especially one that I don't believe ever actually played in Rochester. So, like, that's not scoring you nearly as many points as like special assistant to the GM, guy that will be around the NHL team and, in press conferences and stuff. Like, that's who you hire for that spot. And if he would have gotten into that, I still would have thought it silly, but at least you don't cross the desk of this podcast. But that's bad hiring process. But that's not everyone making assistant coaching moves in the AHL these days. CC, tell me who made good hiring process.
Well, the Phantoms actually made a good hiring, and they have a good hiring process as a process. Jason Smith and Riley Armstrong, if you recognize, if you're an ECHL fan, like, many listeners are, Riley Armstrong was the head coach of the Maine Mariners. And so, hiring guys with experience in coaching in professional hockey.
What a concept.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Still, I mean, Jason Smith has a solid record as a junior coach for Kelowna, developed a lot of young junior players into NHL draftees. He has coaching experience and successful coaching experience working with guys who are younger, getting them to better places. Riley Armstrong's coaching resume is a little lighter, not as decorated, but he has a winning record in 2 seasons as Maine's head coach in the ECHL. He got guys like Ty Roning, who played 50-plus games in the ECHL, to a guy who looked like a solid AHLer last season. That is no small task. Not a lot of guys can do that, where they play that many games in the E and then go to the AHL and look like they belong. That is a very short list. He did the same thing with Sean Day, who just got re-signed to Syracuse. This is a dude who can get people from the ECHL who have been there for a while to stick on AHL rosters. That's impressive because those guys don't generally stick, especially if they've played longer. Like, most of the guys you see that like have ECHL experience and make the NHL or become top tier AHL guys are guys who it's like, how did he ever get like sent to the coast? And they're there for like 10 games, 5 games, and they get called up right away because they're blowing it up down there and coach realized they made a mistake. That's not the case here. Ty Roning played over 50. Sean Day played over 50 ECHL games and then stuck on AHL rosters. That doesn't happen. So those are guys that can develop and motivate players, because that's what's the hardest part about getting ECHL guys to the A and to develop skills. It's motivating them to, push through crappy paychecks because they want to go, on and do something bigger and better, and they're willing to work for it. So these are very good hires in that you got guys who are experienced, who have a history of development, who have a history of coaching in a successful way at the professional level, and you hired them without them having to be the best friend of your head coach, GM, etc. Like, that's good process. That's what it's supposed to look like. And the Phantoms are the ones that did it. Congrats to them.
Yeah. And of course, you've got the Comcast Spectacor tie with them owning the Maine Mariners and also the Philadelphia Flyers. So a little pluck from that. But aside from that tie and that, business management tie, it was a good hire. And you can make good hires. Gasp. You can make good hires with connections like that. Yeah. Imagine that. It doesn't always have to be the Michael Pekkas, and again, that was just name brand recognition in my viewpoint, in my opinion. But yeah, great hires by the Phantoms. And last but not least, let's talk about Bridgeport and Rick Kowalski getting hired on as an assistant coach for Bridgeport and the Bridgeport Islanders, I should say.
Yeah, Rick Kowalski absolutely is Brent. So the Sound Tigers just hired Brent Thompson's replacement. Full stop.
The Islanders.
No, I will not call it.
I know. That's why I kind of drug it out and waited for you to respond.
That is not the name of the team. I don't care what they said. I will not honor that name.
Okay, I'm getting the same energy from you right now as I got from Norm Macdonald playing Burt Reynolds on Jeopardy. Burt Reynolds? That's not my name. Burt Reynolds. That's not my name. Say my name. Yeah. It's written down there.
They will be the Sound Tigers as far as I'm concerned on this podcast. You can correct me as much as you want. I don't care. Rick Kowalski is going to replace Brent Thompson at some point. Like, I will bet $100 right now the next coach of the Bridgeport Sound Tigers is Rick Kowalski. Like, lock it in. This is a guy who was Lou's AHL head coach for the Devils for the last 6 seasons that Lou was the GM for the Devils. He was the ECHL head coach in the New Jersey Pipeline for 4 seasons before that. He knows Lou Lamoriello and, by default, his son, Chris Lamoriello. He has the resume and experience of an AHL coach. He's developed later round picks from the AHL and got them to the NHL. Guys like Adam Henrique, Blake Coleman, Reed Boucher, Steven Giunta, who went undrafted, went on to play significant NHL games. So did Eric Jelena and John Merrill. He's also has guys on Bridgeport's roster he's been the head coach of before, like Seth Helgeson, your captain, or your probably starting goalie, Ken Appleby. This is someone that the Lamoriellos clearly trust to run an AHL bench. And all of this amid Brent Thompson's quite obvious struggles and many a fan wanting to see his, him join the unemployment line. Yeah, if I'm Brent Thompson, I'm watching over my shoulder. They just hired your replacement, bro.
And my God, looking at Kowalski's, like you mentioned, his coaching resume, there was only 3 seasons where he wasn't behind the bench on a team that wasn't named the Devils.
Yeah.
You had the Trenton Devils in the AHL. You had the Albany Devils in the AHL. You had the Binghamton Devils in the AHL. And then he was an assistant coach for New Jersey for 3 seasons. The only 3 seasons he wasn't with a team named the Devils was in the ECHL in 01-02. He was a player assistant with the Roanoke Express in the ECHL. He was also an assistant in the AHL back when Norfolk, the Admirals, were in the AHL in 05-06. And his first season as a head coach was with Trenton, but they were going by the Trenton Titans in 06-07. So reunited, and it feels so Lou Lamoriello. Oh, yeah.
All right. I'm going to put a stop to that. But if you guys are just here for those coaching updates, the news and notes we dropped there for you, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also check us out on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at the Calder Farmstead and Twitter at Calder Farmstead. If you enjoy the podcast, I feel pretty confident that you'll like us on social media as well. Give us a follow there. Make sure you subscribe so you can hear us again when we pop up next in the off season. We're going to head to break so we can play some ads so that my honeymoon trip here to Atlantic City is paid for. So sit tight. We will be right back with winners and losers of free agency.
We talked about coaching. Now it's time to talk about the winners and losers as NHL free agency opened up on July 28th. And the majority of these contracts that we're going to be talking about were NHL two-way contracts. So a lot of these guys have the opportunity and the likelihood of playing down in the American Hockey League. And yeah, some, I don't want to say a lot because some AHL contract signing announcements got sprinkled in there, but NHL contracts were and still trickling in, kind of are the name of the game, especially this past week. Like I said, from July 28th till as this airs on August 6th, Got a lot of signings, got a lot of winners, got a lot of losers in the AHL. So let's start with one. Their parent club, Tampa Bay, doing pretty well for themselves, winning a second Stanley Cup in a row. But the Syracuse Crunch, definitely winners in this offseason because you bring back Boris Tkachuk, Alex Barré-Boulet, Otto Sampi, Gemel Smith, Taylor Radish, Sean Day, Cal Foote. And then you also bring in Remy Ely, Darren Radish, Maxime Lagacé, Gabriel Dumont, and Charles Hudon. I mean, you're retaining a lot of solid guys that you had from last season, and you're bringing in some solid guys too. So that's a win.
Yeah, it's impossible to look at what they did, especially that they didn't really lose anybody meaningful. Like when they, went back to a single affiliate, some of those guys are going to move on, but like they're bringing more talent in the door than went out by a very wide margin. Now, I don't expect guys like Alex Barré-Boulet, probably not Boris Tkachuk or Gemel Smith, to be, spending a whole bunch of time in Syracuse. It would surprise me at all if Barré-Boulet is in Syracuse next season, but Tampa's going to do weird things. So, but the rest of that, I mean, even if you take those three away, that still gives you guys like the Radish brothers, reunited for the first time since juniors when they were in Erie, I want to say. Mm-hmm. You went out and, fixed one of the big problems you had last season, which was goaltending, got one of the best goalies available in Max Lagacé, got good depth scoring, got good upfront scoring, re-signed a bunch of the defensemen you needed to keep. This is going to be a contending team in the AHL this year, barring injury and a bunch of goofy call-ups. But like, this is a W for them in terms of what it means for the Syracuse Crunch.
Moving from the North Division over to the Pacific Division, the newest team in the Pacific Division, the Abbotsford Canucks. And it didn't look very good, especially as we've talked about on the program. They didn't have an identity for the longest time. Their sweater reveal was kind of a fizzle and just kind of a dud, at least from our perspective. But they came out strong. And on July 28th, they announced 7 players that were coming over and signing on the dotted line for the Abbotsford Canucks, or at least for the Vancouver Canucks that we're going to be playing in Abbotsford. But re-signed, you've got John Stevens and Justin Bailey. Signed, you've got Philippe De Giuseppe, Nick Patan, Sheldon Rempel, Kyle Burrows and Sheldon Drives from the Colorado Eagles, and Devontae Stevens. You want to talk about a big loss for Syracuse? Devontae Stevens heading over to the Vancouver Canucks and therefore the Abbotsford Canucks for next season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Abbotsford did a really good job of stocking the pool here. Utica from last season did have a split affiliate, but a lot of those players, it seemed like night in and night out, were Canucks prospects. The Canucks are, because of GM Bim Jenniford are in some trouble with the cap, so they're going to need some of those young guys to get called up and to fill roles on cheap contracts. But they brought in a lot of good veterans to kind of supplant and put around their younger guys, and that was a smart move. They got 2 of their better RFAs coming back in John Stevens, Justin Bailey. A lot of the other guys they got are not people who are going to be pushing for a whole bunch of NHL time. Nick Patan, Phil Di Giuseppe, Sheldon Dries are pretty known quantities at this point. They're like top 6 AHL players, but they don't have the skills to stick in the show. And that's fine. They're going to be guys who are able to help balance lines, who are going to be able to show younger guys, the right way to play while still being able to contribute on the ice. Like, you need those kind of good veteran examples who go out there and do their job every night, put pucks in the net, play defense, as well as, guys who can help carry younger kids on the line on, the top 6 minutes. You can't just throw, your top prospects out there with 2 boat anchors that only know how to punch people and expect good results for both development and, in the standings. This is a surprising move by Vancouver. I really was not expecting this, for them to kind of stock Abbotsford like this, especially too in a Pacific Division that is overstuffed, and it shouldn't be too hard to sneak into a 5th place spot, but all they have to do is basically be better than, probably 400 win percentage, and they'll make the playoffs, because everybody makes the playoffs next year. But this is a lot of good veteran moves for them, bringing back some of their own guys. I'm curious to see if they have anything left in the chamber. I'd like to see maybe one more defenseman that I feel like would be a good pairing with like Jet Wu. But that we'll see what happens. I think Devontae Stevens would not be a good pairing for Jet Wu, even though, still a talented defenseman. But I think they need someone that's not Tucker to be with Jet Wu, because that also very much did not work last season. So I am excited to see what Abbotsford does. This was a surprise, but we got to move on here. We got a lot more teams to talk about.
We do. We certainly do. And the next winner we have, probably not a big surprise, because they have had a long history of successful teams, and that is the Chicago Wolves. And they are bumping back down to one NHL affiliate next year, and that is the Carolina Hurricanes. So signed for the Wolves over from the San Jose Barracuda, Max Letunov. You've also got Alex Lyon, the former Philadelphia and Lehigh Valley goaltender, and CJ Smith and Sam Militek. And those four guys alone, I mean, you have those great prospects coming in from Carolina as it is, and then you bring in these guys as well. Not too shabby.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because in some points last year, I think I even forgot who was Nashville property and who was Carolina property, because it all just kind of blended together.
It did.
But like, they still have a lot of really good young guys, as well as, picking up quite a few quality, veterans like that. Alex Lyon is a very good goaltender, very capable. It's going to be weird to see him in a jersey that is not Lehigh Valley, just because it seems like he's been their, franchise goaltender for the last 20 years.
Right.
Max Letunov too, another quality, middle six piece that can put the puck in the net. They can pair him with younger guys that maybe struggled a little bit last year or didn't get quite the ice time, just based on how stacked they were up front. Sam Militek too, good middle pairing guy. CJ Smith, same thing. They bring aspects that are, CJ Smith in particular is a little more physical, a little less flashy. He'll pair well with someone like Jamison Reese, who is a little smaller, but a little scrappier, but has a lot more skill, and he can help, find loose pucks and get them to Jamison Reese. Sam Militek, same thing, good hard-nosed kind of 200-foot player, another guy that can help kind of flesh out some of those lines and give stability to the younger guys, all while still, again, having, contributable skills on the ice, being able to put pucks in the net, maybe not every night, but, chipping in, putting in 40 points over a 72, 76 game campaign. That's not out of the question for any of them, really. And I think those are good signings, guys who bring you value, who show on ice attributes, but can also be, not necessarily leaders, but someone who can set a good example and help, balance lines that contributes. That's what you're looking for in these signings. And that's absolutely what Chicago went out there and did. I have no idea what their goaltending situation looks like, but I imagine Alex Lyon is not someone they signed to just ride the bench. He's going to be in the mix, getting games in there, and that's going to be beneficial for them as well.
Well, and I think another addition that actually just happened within the past few days is Josh Jacobs from the New Jersey Devils. He signed over. He brings defensive depth. He's not, an earth-shattering, signing or anything like that. Sean, shakes his head with a smirk on his face. Not a good smirk either, but
he is a guy that is listed as a defenseman. That is correct.
I just wanted to throw him in there because he was another addition. But Alex Lyon is 28 years old. You look at the other goaltenders that are theoretically starting for Chicago next year. Beck Warm is 22. Dylan Wells is 23. And theoretically, you also have Eetu Makaniemi. Say that 10 times fast. Who is also 22. So you have a bunch of early guys in their early 20s, and then you bring in Alex Lyon, who, like you said, feels like he's been playing for Lehigh Valley for 100 years, and he actually did play at least 25 years during that 6 overtime game, Lehigh Valley versus Charlotte, but that might have aged him a little bit there. But yeah, to bring in a veteran like Alex Lyon, great savvy move for these, to mentor the young goaltenders too.
Especially too, because that means that someone like Dylan Wells, who I think is primarily an ECHL caliber goalie at this point, isn't going to have to carry, 35 games this season for Chicago, which I don't think would work well for them. I think pairing him with Beck Warm and giving Dylan Wells, 10 starts or less in the AHL is probably your ideal mix.
Right. And God, I'm having a big brain fart here just because of half of the ECHL not playing last season, who is the Carolina and Chicago ECHL affiliate? Is it still Greensville? Greenville, not Greensville. Come on, CC.
I think it's Greenville still.
I'm
not positive on that.
The Greenville Swamp Rabbits, yeah.
I mean, I guess they get to keep, Charlotte gets to keep them and Carolina doesn't? Or yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Not positive.
Yeah, I might have to look that up later because that's the ECHL, AHL, NHL affiliation trees are a little weird. They need some posts to get them straightened out again for sure this season. But a couple more teams to talk about in the winners column. Let's stay in the Central Division. Let's talk about the Grand Rapids Griffins. Lots of two-way contracts coming in late July, early August from the Detroit Red Wings. Re-signed Kyle Criscuolo. I always call him Chris Criscuolo because Crisco. I don't know. Taro Hiroshi and Calvin Pickard, Vegas Golden Knights legend Calvin Pickard, I might add.
You're not wrong.
I'm not wrong. No. And then some new acquisitions, Luke Witkowski and Ryan Murphy, a name that we were very familiar with the Henderson Silver Knights. Holy crow. Nice defenseman pickup by the Grand Rapids Griffins.
And that was something too that I think Grand Rapids really did not have a good sampling of last year. They needed defensemen who could move the puck, who could skate with the puck, who were capable of, running a power play. And I think Jared McIsaac could be that guy for them. I think they kind of think that too, but he missed a bunch of time last season. He's still very young, very unpolished. But he has a lot of good, NHL caliber skills to him, but they need someone too that, if McIsaac gets called up, that's 100% of their, good puck moving, good skating defenseman. So having someone like Ryan Murphy there to be able to take over that load, who's very unlikely, I think, to get any time in Detroit, but very much could help mentor McIsaac or could, run a second power play unit or be, a top pairing guy, put McIsaac on the second. I think that's something that gives Grand Rapids an element they didn't have last year. They also keep a lot of the big names that helped carry the load for them last year. Barber is still under contract for them. Chris Cuolo is coming back. Hiroshi is coming back. Calvin Pickard, I'm not crazy about. I don't think he's an AHL goalie yet, but I think that he could be one, maybe like a okay-ish one. Luke Witkowski too, good veteran player, has been praised up, down, left, and right for his leadership abilities in Syracuse. He was the captain there, I believe, last year and for a few years before. Still able to contribute on the score sheet, but not quite as much as he's getting older and is not the most fleet of foot, to say the least. But he's not someone that I've seen in film just getting, burnt like a bad piece of toast when it comes to letting goals in. So he's more of a defensive guy, still can contribute a little bit, but everyone speaks volumes about his leadership. So I'm willing to say that as long as he's able to still contribute on the ice, those leadership qualities do matter. But this is another good, taking the things you have and making sure they don't leave and making sure that you add pieces that you were maybe missing a little bit last year. In an ideal world, I'd like to see Grand Rapids sign another goaltender. I don't know off the top of my head if Boyle is still on their roster under contract.
He is a free agent, I believe, at this moment. Yeah, so I'll confirm that, but our AHL Central Division and Cleveland Monsters correspondent, since they're not in the Central anymore, Elaine Shercliffe has been compiling off-season roster trackers. And Grand Rapids was one of the teams, and I noticed he was on the free agent portion of that. So I'll just look him up real quick and see. I would not trust Calvin Pickard with a starter's workload, and I don't think they have any other notable goalies in the system. So they should go grab a guy like Thomas Scholl, who's just hanging out in Europe, not that busy right now. Definitely an AHL caliber goaltender, as we saw last season. You think that maybe Grand Rapids should maybe take another flyer on Pat Nagel, or is that ship
sailed?
I would.
I mean, if Nagel, I would bring both Nagel and Boyle back and maybe do kind of like what they did last year, where they go 1A, 1B. They give Calvin Pickard he played 4 games last year, 5 games. You stretch that over a longer season, he maybe gets up to 10. Kind of the same thing we just talked about with Chicago about balancing, your young ECHL caliber goalie with some AHL games, but not giving him more than he can handle because he doesn't need to get blown up.
Well, and there's also these two goaltenders that are currently on loan. Philip Larson and Victor Bratstrom are both on loan, according to Cap
Larson,
Friendly.
if I remember, is more capable. I wouldn't say he's AHL starter off the top of my head. I have no idea who the other person is.
Yeah. They, according to Cap Friendly, they don't have European assignment clauses in their contract, but they're both on loan to Europe currently. They're both in their last year of their ELC as well. So maybe those are your Toledo guys, although Toledo just signed Billy Christopoulos, Air Force Academy alumni. So anyway, that's the goalie situation. You bring in Calvin Pickard. He's 29, another guy you feel like has been in the NHL, AHL for a long time. And feel like
he was younger than that.
You thought he was younger than that?
I'm thinking of Caden Fulcher. That's who I'm thinking. Calvin. Okay.
Yeah. Caden Fulcher.
Very much my mistake. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, Caden Fulcher was who I'm thinking of. No, Calvin Pickard's a more capable AHL goaltender than that. I was thinking of Caden Fulcher. He's an ECHL guy. All right.
Gotcha. Okay. Little confusion.
Let's talk about our last winner here.
The Ontario Reign out in the Pacific Division re-signed Elias Anderson, and they also signed Garrett Sparks, coming over from the Stockton Heat of Calgary from last season and signing on the dotted line for the LA Kings organization. TJ Tynan, the Colorado Eagles captain last year. LA having a penchant, at least the past couple seasons, for stealing Colorado's captains. They did it with Mark Alt 2 seasons ago, and now they do it again with TJ Tynan. Mark Alt joining the San Jose Barracuda, so not going too far, but he left the Ontario Reign this season. And last but not least, Braden Burke, who was acquired, his rights were acquired from Tucson in a 2-for-2 trade that saw Boko Amama go over to the Tucson Roadrunners. So did you that was kind of a blip on the radar. Did you see that trade?
I did. I mean, a lot of people seemed like they were very broken up that Boko Amama left. I'm okay. I mean, he was a guy. He wasn't very talented. He mostly just hit and punched people. And I mean, sure, but like that's a fourth line guy in the AHL. You got to do what you got to do to, earn a paycheck and keep your job. But like, he's not someone who, from an on ice hockey talent perspective, I'm sad to see go. Everyone seemed to like him, but that's when you're a bottom six guy who's, the very first to be on the chopping block. Everyone needs to like you. That is part of your job description, is make everyone like you.
Right.
But in terms of Ontario knocking this one in the park, getting Elias Anderson, big W for them, but stealing, the AHL's MVP last year and guy who was at least in our best forward, finalist in TJ Tynan, getting a star goalie, very good caliber AHL starter in Garrett Sparks, and Braden Burke for pretty cheap. Burke had a down year last year in a weird, COVID season, but has had a pedigree before that of being a pretty good, second line producer. And they're adding all of that into, a very good returning cast for the Black and Silver Bandits, who are going to have another year, another off season where they're able to actually hopefully train and, be ready with Robleski another year under his belt. Like those are big gets. You got a good starting goaltender, which was a problem for them last year, as they got very poor goaltending out of Berube and Villalta and occasionally I can't think of his name. Troy Grossman?
Yeah. Grosnick. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And very rarely Troy Grosnick. So getting someone who I know that they can, put back there and, set it and forget it in Garrett Sparks, that's a huge win for them. TJ Tynan, I mean, anytime you can bring in the league MVP from the previous year, that ain't too shabby either. Braden Burke, who I think can be a much better contributor than what he showed last year, alongside all of your Black and Silver Bandits, many of whom I expect to at least stick around the AHL. I'm sure some of the bigger names on that end will find their way. Quentin Byfield, Alex Turcotte, maybe Arthur Kaliev will find their way to the Kings for a portion of the season. But a lot of the other guys are going to stick around, and they're going to, in my opinion, they're still a very scary looking team. I think they could be a very entertaining team again this year.
Well, and 11 of the 15 forwards that are non-roster signed to LA Kings contracts, 11 of the 15 are on entry-level contracts. So that's a young roster. Average age, 22.1 for that forward core. So yeah, TJ Tynan has become the oldest guy on that forward core at 29 years old. Martin Furk is 27. That's the next closest guy. And Vladimir Kachev is 25. So
that's not a real person.
That's not a real person. I made him up. Sorry about that.
Well, I mean, that wraps up our winners section here. If your team was a winner of free agency, congratulations. But if that's all you wanted to know, we're going to take a break here and then cover the losers of free agency on the other side. Regardless, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Check us out on social media. On Facebook and Instagram, we are at the Calder Farmstead, whereas we're just Calder Farmstead on Twitter. If you enjoy us as a podcast, I feel pretty good that you'll like us on social media as well. We post some fun memes. We have a good time. Stay tuned. We are going to talk losers of free agency after the break. Sit tight. We'll be right back.
We have discussed the winners in free agency, or at least up to this point. And for every winner, there is a loser. They call Alabama the Crimson Tide. They call me Deacon Blues, and they call this the losers segment of the Calder Farmstead, or at least up to this point in AHL free agency. So let's get started with this one to be determined. Still a bit of a TBD on this one, but currently as it sits, Bakersfield Condors, one of the, I want to say 3 or 4 AHL teams that didn't really get any two-way signings on July 28th. I had a big thread on at FPC_AHL of all of the two-way contracts that the NHL put out, and a few AHL ones sprinkled in there too, of course. But Bakersfield, not a lot of from Edmonton or Bago.
Yeah, they signed Tim Soderlund, who I have no idea who that even is. But they did qualify Benson, Marody, and Skinner, but they have not signed yet. And until the ink is dry on those 3 contracts, Bakersfield is in danger, and they should be aware of that. Now, I think they probably sign, and it may come out, middle of next week that they've all signed their qualifying offers. They'll be back in Bakersfield or, on the Edmonton press box circuits, sometime next season. But until the ink is dry on those, they are not signed, and things do not look good in Bakersfield because they also lost Kevin Gravel, Joe Gambardella, Ryan Stanton, and Max Gildon. Now, Max Gildon, they didn't technically lose to free agency, but that was their best defenseman by a long margin there, and he's not coming back. So there are alarms going off in Bakersfield Condors fans' heads that we don't have these guys locked down, and we have a lot more talent going out the door than we do have coming in. That is not a good sign, and that is going to put you in the loser bracket until, your top 3 guys there in Moonshine sign.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the off-season player tracker on BakersfieldCondors.com, and you have, let's see, how many guys have signed or they've announced signing. You have Matteo Gennaro, signed on July 13th, left winger. Another winger, right winger, Dino Cambeets, signed on July 22nd. And then, Dylan Wells traded to Carolina, like we talked about with the Chicago Wolves. And then, it's like there's a lot of lost. Oh, yeah, Joe Gambardella signed with the New Jersey Devils.
Yep.
So, just
not more talent is currently not on the docket than there is on the other side. Right. That puts an L in your hand. CC, our next team, we had a little bit of a disagreement about.
We did, but I want to hear your side of the story first, and maybe I'm too close to this one, as they say. Colorado Eagles has been filed under the losers column, and in a sense, rightfully so, because you have re-signed Kiefer Sherwood and Jason Megna, which I thought you should. I put out an article saying these are the Eagles players that they should, or at least the Avalanche should prioritize in re-signing, and Sherwood was one of them. Megna was one of them. They also brought in Dylan Secura from the Vegas and Henderson organization. They brought in Matthew Boucher, who was the ECHL Rookie of the Year with the Utah Grizzlies. They, signed him up to a 1-year, 2-way contract there. Well-deserved for him. And Roland McCune, the former captain of the Calder Cup champion Charlotte Checkers. 3 years running, Sean. 3 years running. Calder Cup champions. What a what a go. What a go. But they lost a significant amount of talent as well. Today, they announced Michael Vecchione over at the Washington Capitals organization on a 1-year, 2-way deal. So Hershey, a little check mark there. Nice depth forward. Well, I mean, he could be a second line, forward, top 6 forward, in my opinion. Michael Vecchione. Connor Timmins traded to the Arizona Coyotes for Darcy Kemper. Avs threw in a first-round draft pick as well, but Connor Timmins was the prospect that they threw in. TJ Tynan, as we mentioned, off to the LA Kings. Liam O'Brien signing a contract with the Arizona Coyotes as well. Adam Werner signing a contract with the Calgary Flames. Already brought up Sheldon Dries and Kyle Burrows signing with Vancouver. And you know what all those guys have in common? They all signed with teams that have AHL teams in the Pacific Division. So Eagles fans are still going to be seeing these guys just in different sweaters. But Sean, I want to hear your opinion.
And
go ahead.
I like the Sherwood and Megna signing. Secure is a big get. We'll see what Matthew Boucher can do at this level. He deserves the shot. I will give him credit for that. He, being the ECHL Rookie of the Year, you deserve a shot in the AHL. What he can do in the AHL is a whole different story. Roland McCune is a guy at this point. Yes, he was the captain of that team and he was a solid contributor, but those were quite a few seasons ago. And his, it looks like Father Time is starting to nip at his heels. So he's still able to, be a contributor, but not nearly as a significant one as maybe 2 or 3 years ago, or at least that's the way it looks. So you have 3 good signings, 1, lottery ticket and a guy. And then going out the door, you have a buttload of talent that you didn't really replace. Now, obviously, replacing TJ Tynan is quite the tall order, but some of the other, guys got signed that were certainly capable of stepping into his shoes at least 80% of the way. Chris Terry, we're going to talk about here in a little bit. That was a guy you could have gone out and gotten. There was no reason to lose Liam O'Brien. The man left Hershey to come to you. You couldn't have offered him something else.
Right.
The Connor Timmins trade, which, that's beyond the scope of our podcast, but my God, Joe Sakic got fleeced. But that's a piece that was going to be, something you needed for going into next season. Vecchione, I like him as a good middle 6 guy. I think he's a good depth scorer. But again, he walks out the door to go to Hershey. Adam Werner was probably one of the more reliable goaltenders in the 5 that they started last year, 6. Many of those guys also too are kind of questionable to come back. If I had to ask you right now, CC, who is the Eagles starter for game 1 next season? Do you feel confident about whoever you come up with?
Well, they've got 4 guys under contract. You've got, Hunter Miska. You've got Jonas Johansson, who signed a surprise 1-year, 2-way deal. So I think that on opening night, unless Trent Miner or Eustace Anunen just really show out in training camp, I think your 1-2 combo is going to be Johansson and Miska. And I don't know exactly what the order is. So long answer to a short question. No, I don't know the order of that on opening night.
And Miska's shown in the past that he can be kind of capable. Johansson, more or less so, but no one you feel great about.
No, and Trent Miner, I was impressed for a young goaltender coming out of major juniors unexpectedly because of COVID and everything, and the relaxing of the CHL, bargaining agreement for that season and all that. and then goes back to Vancouver and just continues to show out. So there's promise with Trent Miner. Eustace and Noonan, I feel like, may need a little seasoning at the pro level, and both Miner and Noonan are both on entry-level contracts, so you could bounce them down to Utah if you really saw fit. Peyton Jones really struggled at the AHL level. He's a free agent for the Eagles, but without spending too much time on my home market, Dan Renouf, that's a guy for Grand Rapids that we didn't mention that signed a contract with Detroit, and he's heading back to where his career started. So Dan Renouf going over there, a big loss for the Eagles as well. To lose Timmins and Renouf, two top pairing guys potentially, depending on who you pair them with. You've got Justin Barron, who's still a rookie, Nate Clerman, who's still a rookie, Keaton Middleton on defense. Not a fan of his what I saw last season in Colorado from him, but yeah, I mean, you bring Charles Edouard Dastos from Grand Rapids, not a good trade for Dan Renouf, in my opinion. Granted, it wasn't a trade, but Andreas England from Ottawa and Belleville, you got a lot of question marks, and I can see why you
got a lot of replaceable bodies and a lot of talent going out. To me,
shape of an L on the Eagles' forehead. Fair enough. Again, maybe I'm too close, and maybe just the shakeup of chemistry and the shakeup of guys. That's sometimes what you need in an organization, and I'm ever the optimist when it comes to when things shake up like this. And quite frankly, who wants to cover a team that's losing? Not me. But anyway, that's it for the Colorado Eagles. Let's move on to Iowa. This is one I do agree with because they signed Kevin Churchman, Joe Cramarosa, Dominic Turgeon, Joe Hicketts, but they lost, this is a big one, Jerry Mayhew to Lehigh Valley, Gabriel Dumont, and then Louis Belpedio. Lost those three. And then those are huge. And then still unsigned, Mason Shaw and Will Bitton, restricted free agents, qualified but still unsigned. Yeah. When I heard the Jerry Mayhew news, I'm just like, ooh, you lost Sam and Oss 2 seasons ago, and now you lose Jerry Mayhew.
And that team played different when Mayhew came back. Like, you could see a rise in the level of play from everyone on that roster when Mayhew came back. Mm-hmm. It took 2 games for him to get that locker room playing like they wanted to win games again. And to lose what was basically the face of your team for nothing. He walked. He went to Philly. Like, it's not great. And I understand, he probably wants another crack at the show. And man, if I'm the Flyers, there aren't too many rosters that you can squeeze in the bottom 6 somewhere that are better than the Flyers. Like, he's going to have opportunities to make it in the show there. Plus, he's going to have opportunities to play with a lot of more talented forward group in the AHL than I think what Iowa has coming up. But this is a case of, they made some decent signings. Cramarosa, Turgeon, Hicketts, those are good guys. Churchman's maybe a little less so. But, I assume Shaw and Bitton are probably going to sign their qualifying offers. I'm not too concerned about that. But you lost, your face of your team, your top scorer, and a very capable defenseman, and you brought in some decent guys in return. That's more talent coming going out of the door than it is coming in by a pretty wide margin, and guys that meant something to that locker room and to that franchise. Like, that's an L. I don't know how you phrase that any other way. That's an L.
I mean, maybe Boldy steps up. I mean, that's a name that obviously sticks out, but
I expect guys like Boldy to step up. I expect probably Kalen Addison's going to spend another year there. I expect they'll probably see a little bit of Marco Rossi should he, be able to give it a go. And that's going to be exciting. But at the same point, you could have had all of that and Gary Mayhew or Jerry Mayhew. Yeah, you could have. It was totally possible. And you didn't. And you didn't do anything to replace him with, a Chris Terry or Cal O'Reilly. I mean, he probably wasn't leaving Lehigh Valley, but still, you had other options out there you could have gotten that would have, if not, carbon copied Mayhew, been someone that filled a similar role. But they didn't. They're going to have to hope that the kids step up. And I think they will, but that's still a very big if.
Well, hey, you re-signed Andrew Hammond.
Speaking of teams signing Chris Terry, let's talk about Bridgeport.
Yes. Bridgeport announced 6 forwards that they have signed or re-signed. 5 of those 6 were re-signings. So you had Jeff Kubiak, Eric Brown, Felix Bibo, Cole Koski, Kyle McLean, and then the only new addition out of that forward group was, as you said, Chris Terry. And because of that, go ahead.
Chris Terry, grizzled old veteran, tracksuit collection, peak of his game. But like, that's still a dude who contributes at the AHL level, who can put pucks in the net. He knows his role coming in here. He has to anyway. That, veteran leadership, be a top 6 forward, produce and show the kids how it's done. But Bridgeport needed 2 things coming into this offseason. They needed scoring depth, and they got Chris Terry. That's a good, fill of the box. I would have liked to seen them grab another 2 or 3 more guys. Michael Vecchione would have been a good signing there. Players like that. But they needed defensemen. All of their defensemen that are, veteran guys that aren't prospects. So basically not Bodie Wild. They need guys who are fleet of foot, who can play defense, who can move the puck. They let Ryan Murphy go somewhere else. They let a bunch of other guys go, places that would have filled those roles for them. And Derek Pouliot, also available on the market, didn't go get him. They needed guys like that, and they didn't get them. They also needed goaltending. They didn't get it. Max Lagasse signed somewhere else. We just talked earlier, too, in our winners section about Alex Lyon. He went to Chicago. Like, those are goaltenders you needed to try and track down and put money in their pocket, and you didn't. Garrett Sparks, could have signed him too. Bridgeport just hanging out, for the most part, adding Chris Terry and then standing pat. And that's just not enough. Not after the abysmal season that they turned in, and one that wasn't terribly surprising given the level of talent that they ended up having. So this is yet again another not hopeful season heading into Bridgeport, where you just hired your replacement coach.
Well, and I guess you still got, Parker Wotherspoon. You got Blade Jenkins. And you also got, I mean, just some of these names to kind of put a fun spin on it. I mean, Bridgeport may usurp the Rockford Ice Hogs for most made up team or player names. Mitch Van de Sample, Otto Kuvula, Anatoly Golashev, Ken Appleby. I mean, at least they may usurp
Durando.
Yep, Durando. Durando. Anyway, I'm just trying to put a little positive spin there. But anyway, let's move on.
I mean,
what's that?
I was gonna say they're gonna. It's gonna be tough to. I can't see a way in which Bridgeport at this point is really gonna make a turn from last season. But let's move on. Let's talk about. We have 2 more losers left on the list here. Let's talk our second to last one. Cece, who is it?
It is the Texas Stars, and they re-signed Jared Rosberg, goaltender Colton Point, and Ben Gleason. Then they brought in Alex Petrovic, Andreas Borgman, and Jeremy Gregoire. Jeremy Gregoire. Gregoire. Yeah. I think he's a Quebecois. So Jeremy Gregoire. Unfortunately, oh boy, the lost list is heavy. Adam Mascarin, Nick Baptiste, Cole Schneider goes back to Milwaukee after taking he goes to Texas for a year after playing with Milwaukee, and then, sandwich year in Texas because he's going back to the Admirals. And the patron saint of the Calder Farmstead podcast, Thomas Scholl, like you mentioned earlier, going to Slovakia. Or not Slovakia. Sorry, he played in he played in Slovakia last year. He's going to the Ice HL between Austria and Italy. He's actually playing with a team in Italy, HC Puestral, I believe. So the Ice HL over there in Italy. But yeah, those are some big names to lose, and not real good replacement names at least up to this point.
I mean, they bolstered the blue line. Petrovic definitely had a resurgent year in Calgary/Calgary.
Right.
Andreas Borgman, I've always thought was a capable, very smooth skating defenseman, has good puck skills. Gregoire, hit or miss, but like none of they needed forwards. They lost forwards. Cole Schneider, Nick Baptiste, Adam Maskren, they needed to sign guys who put pucks in the net to fill that production that just walked out the door. And they got none of it. And that's not a great thing, especially when you saw guys that were, that led the charge last year with Anthony Lewis. Like when they went cold, that team went cold. And they needed depth scoring. They needed more consistent guys to fill the middle of that lineup, and they didn't get them. Especially, too, bringing back Colton Point, but saying sayonara to Thomas Scholl. Like, Thomas Scholl was probably the best goaltender on that roster last year. He at least very much showed that he is a capable AHL goaltender. And, yeah, I think Scheele will do fine as well. But, like, Colton Point's probably at this point exactly who he is. He's a guy that can maybe come in and, in a pinch when you have call-ups, but he's an ECHL caliber goaltender and like a good ECHL caliber goaltender, but he doesn't have what it takes to be a solid AHLer at this point. And I feel pretty comfortable in saying that after what he's shown. But Scholl was the guy that you had, and now you have Scheele, who I think will work out, and Point, who probably won't. You have a good defensive core in front of them, but you need to put pucks in the net. And they didn't go out and find guys who put pucks in the net to this point. Maybe next week they come out and announce a couple of signings of some of the, lingering free agents who are kind of maybe Europe, kind of maybe thinking about a one-way deal that's an AHL only contract, but like this is not a good look for them.
Yeah, and if you put too much of a load on Riley Damiani's back, he's going to have to go to a chiropractor after every game. It's like when Cole Schneider was out last season a lot. I know Damiani stepped up and really, took on a lot of the goal scoring load, and you are bringing Anthony Lewis back. You're bringing Max Martin back, but it's like, yeah, to have those like veteran leadership kind of players to help put pucks in net. I mean, the oldest guy in their forward core is Joel Esperance, and he's 25. Jordan Kawaguchi, I mean, even though he's 24 and he's still on an ELC. I mean, I thought he was younger than that, but yeah, Ty Fellhaber is 23. Riley Tuft is 23. I mean, bringing a guy in their mid to late 20s for crying out loud. A couple of those guys, some vets that can score, but we'll see if they do that. Last but least, it's the Hartford Wolfpack. Have they announced a re-signing? Nope. This was one of the teams. This was one of the teams that was crickets on July 28th. New York Rangers didn't sign anybody to two-way contracts from what I've seen and from what I remember, because that day was kind of a blur, as you'd understand. What's up, Sean?
I believe they didn't re-sign anyone to two-way contracts. They have two signings, but neither of them look terribly promising in terms of will spend time in Hartford. So they signed Dryden Hunt, who didn't play in the AHL last year. He was full-time in the show. And they signed beer-drinking college champion Greg McKegg, who played 2 entire AHL games in the last 2 seasons combined. Mm-hmm. So in terms of things that look good for Hartford, neither of those look like they're going to be doing much of anything. And they also lost Darren Radish. So talent walking out the door, very unlikely that talent is walking back into Hartford's door anyway. And they were not that good last year. And they struggled through significant portions. Now, yeah, I understand halfway through the year, they kind of started to put things together, but like they also had the benefit of playing Bridgeport for 50% of their schedule. That's not going to happen this year. They're going to have to play Hershey and Lehigh Valley, who are going to be good. And those don't look like they're teams that they stack up well against, especially when the fact that they've literally brought in very little that looks promising for Hartford. They needed to go out and get guys who can, they either needed to get guys who can skate or remind Anthony Greco that he can. They needed to get mobile defensemen. They needed to get a better goaltending prospect, just somebody who can stop pucks on a consistent basis, and maybe take some of the pressure off of like Tyler Wall, who is young, but still like Keith Kincaid is not going to mentor him. He made that pretty clear.
What about Adam Huska?
Huska was okay-ish, but how old is Huska? I think he's 24.
24.
24? Mm-hmm. I don't think Huska's really a guy that I think of as being like a future goaltending prospect. Not to mention, the log jam that the Rangers have at the top there with Shesterkin and Georgiev. Like, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
So you need a third guy almost to kind of come in, mentor your prospects. That's not just there trying to make his way back to the show. Like Craig Anderson signed and in Buffalo. And he very clearly is going to be that guy. Like, he knows that he's not an NHL goaltender anymore, but he's going to, still get playing time in the AHL, but he's there and knows that he is the mentor. He is there to shepherd, young guys forward and show them the ropes and how to be a professional and what it takes. Like, that's something that Hartford needs for its goaltenders and needs just in general, more talent on that roster. Like, don't get me wrong. They have guys that I like. I think Will Cooley could end up working out for them, although he was pretty rough at times last year.
Morgan Barron.
Yeah, Morgan Barron should have been Rookie of the Year. But because he didn't play enough games, AHL, voters are just sorting by points, and he didn't come up as number one. So Morgan Barron gets the short end of the stick. I think he's very good. I can't believe Anthony Greco was that bad last year. It seemed like he just couldn't put a puck in the net if it was wide open. But Tyroning looked okay, but you need more than that. You need more depth pieces if you're going to have a successful season, or if you're going to raise these prospects, in a good environment, a good culture. And they just did not do that.
Well, and I think Morgan Barron and Damiani from Texas need to start a one-on-one support group, because unless they get some more signings, they're going to be the ones carrying their teams as young AHL players. It's like,
the Scoliosis Anonymous.
Scoliosis Anonymous. Or SCO for short, SCO, Scoliosis Anonymous. SCO. The members of SCO, the founding members of SCO for the AHL. Oh my gosh, poor guys. Yeah, they need some more support. So Hartford Wolfpack finishing out the list of losers and lovable losers. Sure, we'll throw that in there as well. But anyway, I believe we are nearing the 90-minute mark of the show, and well, wouldn't you know it, that's it. That is it. We're wrapping up in fairly quick fashion, at least for once every month, once every 3-week podcast that we've been doing here in the off season. So thank you for watching or listening, depending on what format you're listening on or watching. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and a number of other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website. Brrr, that's the sound of it dropping down. And enjoy.
If you guys are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the podcasts so that more people can help find it. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video and comment on what you thought of the episode. Doing these very simple things helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve the show. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found in our link tree, which is scrolling down below here on YouTube. But for those listening, is linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's DYSFUNCTION, so we can make music for you too. Cece, where can people find you?
Well, my name is Cece Hockley, and you can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of transactions that we're tweeting out every day from that. So if you want to keep tabs on who's coming and who's going, definitely check that out. My personal Twitter account is at CCHawk. That's SEESEEHAWK. Vast majority of my tweets are about hockey, but hey, you throw in a little music, you throw in some movies, you throw those in there, and hey, if it keeps me interested, it's not going to be bullshit for you. At least that's my hope. Check out my writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at www.fullpresshockey.com. Sean, enough about me. Where can people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien with 80% less hair and less beard. You can find me at Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien _81. Both of those are personal accounts. So like CC, you'll get mostly hockey takes, but occasionally some pop culture. On my Instagram, I'd say a good 60% of it is pictures of my adorable dog. So you can always come check that out. You can find my stats work on Tableau at bit.ly/datadump and chase, all lowercase, all one word. CC, take us home.
For the guy that doesn't clean up too bad in Sean O'Brien, I am CC Hockley once again. This has been episode number 44 of the Calder Farmstead AHL podcast. Thanks again for tuning into the show, and as always, keep your stick on the ice.